And I'll tell you something about the international cooperation policy and how that fits into Horizon 2020. So just to start, as you know, at the moment, the overarching policy guide is Europe 2020. This has a number of aspects which are very relevant to research. First of all, it's talking about driving smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth. So smart growth basically means based on knowledge. It's also, once again, reiterating the objective of investing 2% of GDP in research and development, something we first set in the year 2000 and have not yet managed to achieve. And it has a strong focus on innovation, and that's been reflected in the Innovation Union Flagship Initiative, one of the 7 flagship initiatives as part of Europe 2020. And that in itself has a number of policy aspects, including the European Research Area that was published last year, Horizon 2020, which is coming to the final stages of its preparation, and a number of specific measures such as the Single European Patent. And all these aspects have particular international cooperation linkages. The Innovation Union Flagship specifically mentions the importance of international cooperation, and the ERA also notes how important international cooperation is to European research. So I know you've heard a lot about Horizon 2020 with Jacques Mette's presentation 2 days ago. He will have given you the update. Just to reiterate that this, of course, is a major research funding program from 2014. And it has 3 principal priorities: excellent science, industrial leadership, and societal challenges. And I'll come back to those a little bit as we talk about the international cooperation. So the first thing to look at is just what's been happening to international cooperation in research and innovation over the past few years. And if we look at some of the data, we have here data for number of graduates, for researchers, for investment, for publications, for patent applications. And basically what we have in the bottom of each of these two pairs is we have data for the year 2000, and we have data above it for sometime during the last 10 years, so 2010, 2007, 2010. And the blue data are the EU. And in principle, most of them have in terms of a proportion, have decreased a little bit. Actually, the total amount of investment in research has increased, but as a proportion of global investment, it's decreased. And this has mostly happened at the expense of, or because of, increased investment in the BRIC countries, in Asia as well. So what we see is a changing dynamic, and we think it's a positive thing, of course. We don't think this is negative particularly, but it shows there's been a changing dynamic, and whereas in the past, maybe Europe, the USA, and Japan have been sort of the main focus of research and innovation, that is now obviously becoming a lot more broad around the world. If we look at co-publications, and the thickness of the lines here show where there are more co-publications. Clearly the EU and the USA are still where most of the co-publications have come from. But if we look at the changes and the figures in brackets here, you can see the main changes are with Brazil, with the BRIC countries, with South Korea, and between these countries themselves, this is where the increasing amounts of co-publications are taking place. So we see a rapidly changing landscape in research and innovation, and we need to do something about that. We need to look at that in terms of what happens in Europe. If more and more research is happening worldwide, and if we want to make sure we can take advantage of that, then we obviously have to access that knowledge. So we have to link better with the people who are producing this research. By linking with them, we think we can also get better access to the markets, especially in the developing economies. And if these other countries are also increasing their research capacities, it means if we want people to do work in Europe, we need to make sure we're attractive. We need to make sure people want to come here to work, and that we have good facilities and we have good people ready to do that. And finally, as there's increasing focus on these societal challenges, these global challenges, by definition, they are beyond borders. Things like climate change, environmental issues don't stop at frontiers. Then clearly we think to working together gives us added strength in trying to address those problems. If we look what happened in FP7, FP7 mainstreamed international cooperation. Interestingly enough, even though there was no specific international cooperation program focusing on research in FP7, it invested more in international cooperation with third countries than FP6 and previous programs. And it had some sort of mixed success. We had some very strong areas, such as the European Developing Country Clinical Trials Partnership, and ITER, of course, the fusion reactor, very strong interactions. But there was a perception that maybe some of the things we were doing in FP7 were a little bit ad hoc. They came along at the last minute, and maybe therefore lacked some of the critical mass. Maybe we weren't achieving as much as we could do. And this was confirmed by the interim evaluation of FP7 a couple of years ago. And as a result of that, we decided to produce this new strategy for international cooperation in research and innovation. And the idea would be of this strategy, the underlying principle is to be a little bit more active and a little bit more strategic in what we're going to do. So maybe doing a little less than we've done in the past in terms of quantity of different projects, but increasing the actual scope of those projects and working with maybe fewer partners, but in more depth. And as part of this strategy, we've targeted three main objectives. One is to address very much this idea of Europe's strength in research, making sure we're excellent, making sure we're attractive, and making sure we remain competitive and actually develop our competitiveness. The second one is to address the challenges. Already mentioned, these are global in nature. We can address them better by working together. And the third one, which is also very important for us, is this support to the external policies. So this is policies such as the enlargement policy, but also, very importantly, the development policy, where traditionally we've had quite a lot of effort in international cooperation. So the idea is we will remain open. Horizon 2020, like FP7, like the previous programs, will be open to international cooperation with anybody. We try and improve our targeting of specific areas. And we'll also try and work better with the member states. The framework programs, although they're large, still only account for maybe 6 or 7% of the total public funding in research in Europe. Most of the funding remains with the member states. Hence, if we can work together better, perhaps avoid duplication, make sure that different countries can work together outside the framework program with third countries, that we'd have better impact. And once again, importantly, we try and link more closely with the external policies, mimic some of what's happened with the internal policies. So, for example, the linkages we have now between research funds and structural funds, where there are certain countries, and I see at the back there's a poster about a project in the Czech Republic, where we might be able to mimic that sort of linkages with the enlargement countries and some of the development policies as well. So what will we have? Well, Horizon 2020 will be open. Anybody can participate with European consortia, as they can now. You'll be aware that at the moment we don't automatically fund high-income countries. We can fund them in certain circumstances, but we don't automatically fund high-income countries such as the USA, such as Australia. And that will be extended a little bit in Horizon 2020 to cover the richer BRICS, the BRIC countries with higher incomes. They can still participate, they can still be funded under particular circumstances, but it just won't be automatic anymore. We will produce a series of targeted actions on which these will be principally on a thematic basis. We'll look at these on a thematic basis, but we'll also adjust them in terms of the different countries and the different regions we're cooperating with. And we intend to produce, to try and make this clearer to everybody, we intend to produce roadmaps of what we're intending to do with our key partners and publish those every 2 years. And our first one we're looking to publish early next year. So for this targeting, how will that happen? Well, we'll start off from the Horizon 2020 challenges. There are 7 now in the developing Horizon 2020. There were 6 in the proposal, but there are 7 following the debate with the Parliament and the Council. And also the enabling technologies, things like the biotech and nanotechnology. And we've asked our programme managers to identify areas for cooperation based on a set of criteria. Now, these criteria are not very fixed. It's basically a guide. One is, of course, the research and innovation capacity of the third partner country. Do they have skills which are complementary to ours, which we would like to balance with? Do we think that actually the actual competitive aspects are so strong that actually we do not want to work in particular areas with some countries? Those are the sort of things to take into consideration. Will we get access to markets if we cooperate in particular areas? Will there be a contribution? Is there a contribution to our international commitments, such as the Millennium Development Goals and the post-2015 goals and challenges which are currently being prepared? And also, what's our past experience? Because we all know that in some cases, even with the best of intentions, where we've tried to do good, strong cooperation, it's not always worked for various reasons. So we try and learn from that when we do our targeting. And a lot of these ideas require data. Some of these data are available, some of them aren't. And so part of the aspects of the programme is also to try and improve our data gathering over the next few years. So what we'll see in Horizon 2020 is it will be generally open. We'll see these targeted activities in the societal challenges and the industrial leadership pillars, those 2 first pillars where there are multi-partner projects. Some of these projects will have either preferential or required third country participation. And we'll also be trying to promote the opening of the programme level type instruments, so joint calls, coordinated calls, the EARNets, and some of the public-public and public-private partnerships to third countries. In the excellent science pillar, there are slightly different types of projects here, but the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Fellowships will continue to have an international dimension, strong international dimension for incoming and outgoing fellows. The infrastructures are always very strong. Just the sheer cost and scale of infrastructures mean international cooperation is critical. And the ERC, the European Research Council, although of course it's trying to bring people to Europe, also has a global campaign whereby investigators can spend up to 6 months still in their home laboratories in third countries. In addition to that, there will be these cross-cutting actions. We're hoping to simplify those, so to get away from all this terminology we have now of INCONet and INCOHouse and INCOLab and BILATS into a more a single and solid instrument. And I think Klaus is going to talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities that he can see in that area. So we'll obviously tailor these a little bit to the different countries. Basically, in Horizon 2020, association, or the possibility of association. So association is when countries outside the EU contribute to the budget and then take part, in principle, as if they were member states. So it happens now with Switzerland, with Norway, with Turkey, and that will have to, those will have to reapply for Horizon 2020. But we're limiting now association to the neighbourhood and the European, the wider Europe, if you like, so the enlargement, the neighbourhood countries, the EFTA countries. And there'll be a concentration there, of course, of trying to develop the European research area. We'll then have our industrial partners and many of the emerging economies, many of the BRIC nations. These are the countries which typically perhaps won't be automatically funded, where there'll be a focus on competitiveness, and we'll be looking at addressing the challenges on a global basis, and also getting access to markets. And then for the other countries, the poorer countries, we'll also be trying to support our external policies, particularly development policy. And we'll also be looking at the societal challenges, but maybe from a slightly different point of view, maybe principally from the view of the third country rather than from Europe's viewpoint. We'll have a range of instruments to do that. There'll be the normal funding instruments. There'll be no specific international cooperation funding instrument in Horizon 2020, but all the collaborative type projects will be open to third country participation, and we'll be stimulating again these networking, this twinning between different projects that we've seen quite successfully applied in FP7. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll also be looking at the more program level, the broader areas of support, like the joint initiatives, will also be open to international cooperation. We'll be looking at enhancing the information gathering, partially through these cross-cutting projects that I've already mentioned, but also by looking at some of the other areas, expanding ERA-Watch. ERA-Watch will be replaced by something called the Research and Innovation Observatory, but again, improving the information gathering, the strategic intelligence, in order to allow us to make decisions on this targeting better. And then we'll be looking also at our policy instruments. We have a number, we have about 20 SNT agreements with different countries. We'll be targeting about 11 of those with key partner countries to make sure we can focus on a few areas that we think of critical importance for Europe. And then finally, as I say, we'll also be looking at trying to increase our synergies with the external partners, with the trade, with the External Action Service, and we'll be linking into agreements on science and technology as part of the agreements they have in general. So when the External Action set up partnership and cooperation agreements, as they do with many third countries, we'll be looking to have specific chapters or specific sections within those on scientific cooperation, rather than trying to increase the number of specific agreements that we already have. As part of our strategy, we'll also be trying to promote some of the common principles, things like open access, things like international peer review. These have had additional impetus recently. The G8 looked at open access. The Global Research Council is concentrating on international peer review and open access. And these are the areas, again, we will try and look at trying to get a more level playing field worldwide, building trust, and trying to make sure that our key countries, anyway, the ones we are targeting to cooperate strongly, will have some additional focus in order to try and make sure that we can have equality of our different programs, that they're opening equally on both sides. And finally, as I say, we're wanting to try and revitalise the partnership with the member states. We have this group called the Strategic Forum for International SNT Cooperation, the SFIC. It's a council configuration, so it involves the 28 member states. The idea, again, is to exploit the fact that most of the research funding is still at a national level. But we have a lot of shared values, and if we can share the activities as well, there's a lot more potential for increasing international cooperation at a European level, not just at a Horizon 2020 level. So the idea is that we will try and associate them to the roadmaps, the Horizon 2020 roadmaps, but there'll also be these agendas for research which the member states will carry out with third countries on a variable geometry basis as they request outside the framework programme. And then obviously we'll try and do things together. We'll try and have parts within the framework programme and the member states separately, which are going to reinforce rather than duplicate what's going on. This is something that's it's got a lot of support. It's quite hard to put in place because obviously at the moment especially we have a time of reducing budgets, and people tend to be looking at what they can cut back on rather than what they can cooperate on. So that's all together. That's all been put together into this communication we adopted last September. It's quite short, quite worth reading. The key aspects there I've summarised for you. One of the key outputs will be the roadmaps, which will be published, as I say, early next year, outlining what we're intending to do, and then some of the other aspects which I've already touched on. There's been a lot of debate between the different institutions, the European Parliament and the Council, The Council had conclusions of this in May of the communication itself, the international cooperation communication. They were very supportive of it, which means they are very supportive of the linkage with the Member States. And also the Committee of the Regions and the Economic and Social Committee have also debated the publication. And basically it's had very strong support. So people are very keen on promoting international cooperation. In fact, there's been a few amendments during this debate on Horizon 2020 to try and ensure that international cooperation is strengthened in Horizon 2020, and we'll have to see how that develops over the next few years. It's easy to talk about these sort of things, but actually getting it into practice will be the proof, of course. There's the usual websites, which I invite you to consult, and obviously I'll be very happy to discuss some of the aspects of the programme later. Thank you.
From Brunel University. Thank you very much for both presentations. That was extremely interesting and useful. My question is to John about this scheme of leveraging existing project for future, for using twinning, my understanding, existing project, because my understanding that's a project which were funded under FP7. So how it will be practically implemented?
Well, the twinning, which is basically, as you say, linking, they've done it through two forms. Either in particular calls, they've asked for particular linkages at the time of the call for a different project, or they've done it afterwards and said we want to link with particular countries in particular areas. They're basically the small networking projects, the CSAs, the coordination support actions. And of course, they're done at the moment, they're done by the thematics, and they'll continue to be carried out by the challenges. So it's not part of the international cooperation budget directly, but it's one of the tools, one of the instruments that's, I mean, they're quite cheap and they're quite effective, I think. So it's something we will promote in the future. But it's something actually, of course, that the actual challenges or the program managers of the challenges will have to take forward.
I'm Zlata Novotná from SEITEC Masaryk University. I had a question to Mr. Claxton. Thank you very much for mentioning the poster. We are a center receiving a very huge funding from structural funds, and at the same time receiving the RECPOT project Silica. So we cannot imagine our future without international cooperation. In this context, I would like to ask you about the joint calls. You mentioned that there will be project with preferential or required third country participation, and that there will be some delegated management. Could you explain more about this issue? Thank you.
At the moment in FP7, basically sometimes we will ask in research projects for participation of third countries. We suggest that would be useful. And in some cases, it's made compulsory through these so-called seekers, the strategic international cooperation actions. Those won't exist in Horizon 2020. However, individual projects can make it a requirement that you have a third country partner as well. So, for example, there could be a particular topic, and it may say for this topic you are required, as well as having your European consortium, you are required to have cooperation of a particular country or a particular region. So that's the research projects now, or the research and innovation projects, the collaborative projects which will happen in Horizon 2020. Now, for the joint calls, there was an idea of having joint calls, so a call linked to a different country, and we have several at the moment. We've had quite a lot with Japan, for example, in a number of areas, been quite successful. But the actual original idea was to have a single call, maybe a single evaluation, and then a single project. And that's proved bureaucratically extraordinarily difficult to do, because basically we have two separate structures, and people work within those structures, and it's very difficult to link them. So what's happened in the past is we've had coordinated calls. We've actually had a call in Japan, for example, linked and coordinated with a call in the framework program, FP7, and they've gone through separate evaluation processes, maybe with the same or similar evaluators, but separate processes, and they've resulted in separate projects, which have then been linked through a legal agreement to work together. the hope in Horizon 2020 and the specific clause actually in the rules for participation is to actually go back to the idea of joint calls again. So we can still have the coordinated type calls, but the idea is also to have joint calls whereby there will be a single call, or the wording will be the same, and then a single evaluation. So there will be a single evaluation process, and then probably you'll actually need separate contracts, but they'll be linked together. But the idea that they will be more closely linked. So they're quite important. They're quite big funding normally. They're quite bureaucratic. Therefore, it's best to do it with more funding rather than doing a lot of work for just a few €100,000. It's better to do it for several millions. But they have worked quite well. And one of the things, they've worked in areas we've had them, for example, in aeronautics and nanotechnology, and they've done okay. One of the problems, it's not a problem with them, it's only a measurement issue, of course, is people tend to measure what we do with international cooperation as partners we fund or partners who are part of our contracts. And in coordinated calls and joint calls, although we think they're very important, they're not part of our contracts, they have their own contracts. So actually they register as zero on our data. And that's something we hope, again, to address in Horizon 2020, so that these bigger projects, or these bigger programs, in fact, actually are recognised as significant investment in research, not our money, somebody else's money, or shared money. So we try to look at that as a better indicator of cooperation too.
I'm Hans Melle van Dijk, Utrecht University, and my question to John Stakston is, you showed a slide where international activities are under societal challenge 6, the inclusive, etc. societies. Now, after the budget compromise, there's been a split of that societal challenge. And can you confirm that international activities come under Europe in a changing world, which seems to be logical? And will there be a dedicated budget for international cooperation within that societal challenge?
Okay, so yes, so there were in Challenge 6 when they were in the proposal, where there were only 6 challenges, and I used the proposal terminology there. There are now 7 challenges. The 7th challenge is security. They remain in Challenge 6, in fact, that's where they are. But this is only the horizontal, the cross-cutting part of the budget. So the majority, well, all of the actual research programs, the international cooperation research programs, will be within the challenges or within the pillars, directly within the actual challenges or the technologies. That's like now happens in the themes in FP7. That's where the budgets will be. That's the big budgets for international cooperation. There will be a dedicated budget, however, in Challenge 6 for these cross-cutting actions that Klaus spoke about. What we don't know is what that dedicated budget will be. So already they've got the budget breakdowns now to the challenge level, but they haven't done the sub-budgets, and of course there's a lot of things in those, and there's a lot of pressure going on with those. I wish I could tell you what it would be. I don't know. To be honest, it probably isn't going to be much more than it is now. It might even be less than it is now, but it's probably in that sort of order anyway. But we don't know.
Yeah, my name is David Crowley, University of Nottingham. I've got 3 questions actually, but they're quite brief, directed to John, but I'd welcome Klaus's input also. The first one is about the BRIC countries. I've been traveling in China and India quite widely recently, and a colleague of mine, she's been in Brazil, because these are 3 countries that the University of Nottingham engages with quite substantially. And it was frankly quite frightening to see the lack of understanding of senior people in universities in those 3 countries about what's happening to them in Horizon 2020. In fact, most of them thought that they were no longer eligible to participate in Horizon 2020, and were kind of laughing at me when I was trying to talk about it and working with them in the context of Horizon 2020. My question really is who is responsible for educating these people? Is it the delegations in the various countries? Because it occurs to me that they haven't been very proactive in doing so far. The second question is about the bilats, and I wonder, John, if these are going to continue in Horizon 2020. I ask this for the simple reason that 2 or 3 that I know of have actually been renewed quite recently and will overlap significantly into Horizon 2020. like SEA, EUNet, and Dragon Star in China, etc. So, and the last one is I've recently returned from 3 years at our campus in Malaysia, and while I was over there, I visited several of the European centres, for example, the one in Singapore, the one in Taiwan, and it occurs to me that they could be very useful sources of information on Horizon 2020 and other EU initiatives, rather than simply being repositories of information that, frankly, aren't very widely used and are often very academic. Eminent scientists, etc., and commission officials giving lectures on a sort of ad hoc basis, but most of the time they're quite idle. So my opinion is that they could be put to a lot better use in these countries where, if we are trying to attract more third countries into Horizon 2020, this would seem an obvious way to do it.
The new policy affects Brazil, Russia, India, China and Mexico, just because of its size of its budget, the size of its economy. And all those countries are aware. They're aware through our SNT agreements, the dialogues that take place with that. And for the first 4, also our delegations, where our councillors are also disseminating information. But there is, you're right, there is still a lot of ignorance. And so it's very important to recognise that all these partners in all these countries can participate. They can even be funded. What they can't be is automatically funded. It's just that shift from, they're put on a par with the USA, with Australia. That said, I think, you know, we wouldn't pull up the wool over our own eyes. I mean, I think we will see a drop in participation to begin with, and we'll hope that will repair itself. And to some extent, some of the issues like we just mentioned with coordinated calls, where actually participation registers as 0, if we take those into account, because we have coordinated calls with India, we will do with Brazil, for example, and Russia, those are actually quite strong coordination programs, but they register as 0. So yeah, there's a lot to be done, and that will go on. The biolats, a lot of them, as I say, are renewed. Some of the ERANETs as well, and they will run on for their life as usual, as you'd expect. There won't be a particular instrument called bilat in Horizon 2020, but the cross-cutting projects will include the bilat type of activities. We want to try and get rid of all this terminology, actually, because it's just become, it's sort of proliferated, and they're all basically coordination and support actions. I mean, that's what we're talking about. The last point about using these international centres, I mean, I agree that it would be useful to try and take advantage of some of these areas.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for attending this session.